Xin chào, this is Mics&Mugs by First Advisor. If you're ever wondering whether it's which degree course you should go for, which school, which university you should attend, or even which country should you go to study it, someone even questioned, should they go and study abroad at all? Please tune in to our conversation and then perhaps it can help you making your decision. I have here today my very dear friend, Lee Kirby from Ashbourne College. Lee has been a seasoned Director of Studies at Ashbourne for more than 20 years, helping many students attending their dream universities. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. Well, it's great to be here. Yeah.
So the very teeny tiny but fun ritual that we start at every conversation would be our box of message from the universe.
Okay.
Would you like to pick one?
Absolutely,
for you today?
yeah.
Please do.
Fine. Here we go.
I'm very curious.
Do you want to read it out?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And
It's not private?
No.
Okay.
But then if you would like to share it, you can, and maybe even some thoughts about...
Okay,
yeah?
let's see. It's not in Vietnamese, that's good. You are exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't feel like it. Interesting. What's my thoughts about that? Well, I always feel like whatever happens today, you're going to have a new experience tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. You just carry on with your life. So I get that from this kind of statement. So you sort of carry on with your life. You'll figure things out. You'll land on your feet. No problem.
You have been the Director of Studies at Ashbourne College for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
What will keep you inspired in this very important role?
I think that, first of all, if you get lucky enough to work in education, your job essentially is to help. And it's twofold for me. My primary job is to help students. My secondary job is to help the staff. But actually the third job now is to help the parents. So, and that connects to educational agents as well. So I think that you realize that a lot of what you do every time you come in every day, you do have some kind of sort of office administrational work, which isn't the greatest, but most of your job is about how can I help young people and people improve? And I think that's a great fun thing to come into work every single day.
I would say that helping parents, the thing you just mentioned, is something that is super important. The reason being, they would be the first ones in the family to guide their children, choosing the right path, right? Yeah. In your experience, what would be the difficulties that most parents would experience, and how would you go about helping them figuring out what would be the best solution for the typical issues that they have?
Yeah, I think the tricky thing is that the students that we have are generally between the ages of 16 and 19. And at that age, how much will a child listen to their parent? You've got to be realistic. At a very young age, the child is completely dependent on the parent. They cannot survive without the parent. But as they get older and more independent, that changes to a point in the teens where the parents start to lose control, and maybe the child literally will stop listening to the parent on key issues in particular. Maybe the child will respect certain rules at home and stuff like that, but when it comes to advice about how they should go about their studying, even if the parent is a teacher, even if the parent is a principal, the child may completely ignore it. So I think one of the biggest things we are there to help the parent is to say, look, when you've got an issue with managing your child, tell us and let us be your translator, because Ashbourne is not just one person, we're lots of people, and not every single person can connect. So I'd like to think that I'm good at my job, but I cannot connect to every student. Some students, I have literally no powers of motivation. I could try everything, but then you find another person that can. And I think that's really the biggest thing, is how to motivate your child when you can't motivate them yourself, And our job then as a school is to try and get the parents to say, look, forget about education, just focus on loving your child and enjoying your relationship with them, and let us worry about the education of your child. That's a very difficult thing for a parent to let go of, I would say, yeah. And it's a struggle. Yeah.
As a parent, I can already foresee that happening to me in the future.
Yeah.
So when you dealt with many teenagers from the age of 15 to 17, of course, I understand that some parents would have very good influence and even you call power over the child, but sometimes it's up to the school on how to help the child. What key qualities you would say teenagers in the age group of 15 to 17, what quality should they aim to develop so then they can have a successful A-level years and then university years?
Okay. I think this is changing. I think the big thing that's going to happen now is adaptability.
Adaptability.
Yeah, because the world is going to transform in a way that we do not understand. Okay, AI is in its infancy, and I would say the majority of people I've met in my life have very to little to no understanding of AI. Okay, and this for a young person is a significant advantage because young people, when they grow up, are more familiar with apps and using internet and stuff like that than the older generation. And therefore, their ability to utilize AI and other computer tools successfully cannot be underestimated, one. But two, this idea of adaptability, the idea, I want to be a lawyer and that's my job for the rest of my life. Well, yeah, maybe. But you don't know what's going to happen with the law profession in 25 years or for even 5 years. So I think that having the mindset of creating lots of skills that you're good at, but also having the mindset to say, you know what, if I have to change career paths and be flexible with my future, I'm willing to do that. I think that's going to be a key thing going forward.
Interesting. I like adaptability. I think that's very important and something I would say Vietnamese student would like. Would you say the same thing?
Well, I think that, it's tricky because, there's 80 million people in Vietnam. I don't know how many kids there are, but everyone's slightly different. And at Ashbourne, we've had over 250 Vietnamese students, and not everyone's the same. No. That's true, okay? But you're quite right. There are some kind of things, and traditional schooling in Vietnam maybe drilled kids in a certain way where they were less likely to be adaptable, less likely to be independent. That's true. And therefore, maybe that's something to think about going forward. But having said that, I think that it's, in my experience of dealing with teenagers growing up, a Vietnamese child is more likely to have gone to school by themselves earlier than an English child. That would have happened back in the day, right? And they would have done a lot. They might have ridden on a motorbike with their parents, right, at a very young age. Yes, where, as a UK parent, that would never happen. So there's kind of like, with that kind of sort of exposure, maybe they're not outwardly independent and adaptable, but maybe inwardly they don't realize, in fact, they've got a lot more experience in life than they maybe believe they do. They also, when I first went to a Vietnamese school, I walked around the school during lesson time and it was completely quiet. And then the gong went, yeah? I never heard that before, but okay, sorry, apologies. This gong went off and it was literally like an earthquake because the Vietnamese playground is just the noisiest playground I've ever heard in my life, right? So I think also then, because of that, you've got this idea of Vietnamese maybe come to England, maybe they're a bit shy. That's true, but also, they're also part of a group, in my opinion, are the noisiest children in the world. That's a positive, but I know that's not a negative, right? So they do have the ability to communicate and do have the ability to speak up. So I just think it's about trying to recognize who you actually are and factually just look inside yourself. You probably are a lot more confident and adaptable than maybe you think you are. That's my gut feeling. But obviously, you're not all the same. Everyone's different.
If you have a 15 or 16 years old Vietnamese kid coming to speak to you and saying they are clueless about their future, What advice would you give them?
Most 15, 16-year-olds don't know what they want to do, so don't worry about it. That's the first thing. I think, I'm not so sure how much the question gets asked in Vietnam, frankly, but in England, a 15 or 16-year-old going to like a dinner party with their family and friends, it's not unusual for another parent to say, oh, so what A-levels are you going to do, or what are you going to do at university, or what career do you want to do? And as a child, you've got to have a lot of confidence to say, I'd have no idea. Okay, most children in that situation, under pressure, especially if the table quiets down and then other people are listening, even including their own parents, and maybe their parents have got an idea about what they should say, they're maybe going to pop something out of their mouth, which isn't necessary. It might be true. They might say, oh, I want to be a doctor, lawyer, wherever it might be. But how much is that is based on genuine substance that they've actually researched and done something? I think it's quite admirable to actually say, I don't know. I think that's a perfectly good thing to say, number one. Number two, I think it's worth then choosing a pathway that you have at least considered and then start doing some research about it, because that will at least let you decide whether you don't want to do it. So if you don't know what to do, start with working out what you don't want to do. And then that will help to narrow your vision. And, degrees are significantly broad, that you can go to a degree. And, many students end up maybe doing like an engineering degree and who end up in finance afterwards, right? So don't worry about it. Keep picking different things, do some focus, do some research in a particular area, and then realize, hey, I didn't enjoy that. So in A-levels, there's a great thing called an EPQ, which I would strongly advise all kids to do. At Ashbourne, we don't force anyone to do it. I think it's important that the student wants to do it, but it's like a 5,000 word project which allows students to research any area that they're interested in. So if you were interested in finance, you might decide to research about the wealth tax in the UK, which they're currently discussing, and whether that is a fair idea or not. And by doing that, that will force you to research, be a bit more independent, move away from more kind of sort of formula kind of based learning to actually thinking and researching and understanding. And doing these things, again, will also force you to think, do I actually enjoy that field? So that would be my advice. Don't panic. It's absolutely fine. And it's actually a good thing that you don't lie. Okay. And secondly, just choose a pathway and then do some research and then realize either A, you're interested, or no, I now know I no longer want to do that particular path.
In your experience dealing with so many young adults, I'm sure you have met many cases where a student say, oh, I want to do, like you said, engineering,
Yeah.
but then ended up pursuing a career in finance later on in their life. What would be the key qualities or key skill sets, you would say, a student would try to get from the degree course, whatever it is, to ensure that whatever equip them at that point can be transferable to the next job that they might pursue? Yeah,
that's a good point. Maybe skill is one thing to think about, but I think network is probably better. I think if you think about your own lives, or our own lives now, if we were to get into trouble, or if we needed an idea, or we needed some support, who's your network? If your network's weak, you've got a problem. University, you're going to a place of maybe 20,000 students. That's a great opportunity to network with some really interesting people. So you talk about the value of going to a top-ranking university. Yes, of course, you've got the branding. Yes, of course, you've got the quality of the course. But most importantly, in my opinion, you're going to a place where other students that are capable, that are interested, I'm not saying all of them, but there's a general mix, and they've probably themselves got very good networks. So if you can actually infiltrate those and be a part of it, join different clubs and activities and societies, and you probably will find that through that, you'll gain as much than from your degree. Of course, with the degree, there's many things that you can look to gain from it. And if there's one thing I would tell any students to do is just make sure you read. I know it sounds a weird thing, but make sure you use your university years to spend a significant amount of time reading and researching, because I think that ultimately it's through that kind of independent research that you really start to kind of anchor your learning and understanding of things. But from a networking point of view, that's where I think your time should be spent at university.
That's great. Yeah. Now let's jump back to a point where we're talking about how to get into that top UK university. Yeah. Would you say, of course, branding is very important, ranking is very important. So how to get into a top UK university?
Yeah, there's lots of different things to think about here. I think the first thing is, we were talking earlier about, what you want to do at university. And if students say, well, I don't know. Yes, that's an issue if you're trying to maximize your chances to get into the place you want to go to. That's true. Because ultimately, when you apply to university, your subject choices need to be geared towards your degree program. So if you, let's say, want to study engineering, the first thing to think about is, are my subject choices going to maximize my chances, first of all, for that university to say, tick, this guy fits our criteria. That's your first thing. Don't fall down because you haven't done the basics, whether that might be a university entrance test, whether that might be doing the right subjects, etc., etc. So I think that's the first thing. Secondly, then what are universities looking for? Now, with an American application, and I use America as a distinct difference to the UK, they're looking at the kind of sort of fully rounded individual, okay? They're very, very interested in what you do outside of the classroom. That's not necessarily connected to your degree in any way, right? The UK, I would say, is like almost fundamentally different to that. Every part of your personal statement, in my opinion, should be focused absolutely on a degree program that you're studying. Any sentence you put into the personal statement that doesn't link back to the degree, I think is a wasted sentence. And therefore, when you start up the degree preparation, if let's say you were wanting to study a law degree, you might start off and say, okay, what makes me stand out from other students based on my experience so far in education or towards law? And then you might be like, I don't know what to write down. And that then is the first step, is that you then have to think, okay, what tasks am I going to do that make me stand out? And that could be things like work experience. That could be the EPQ that we were talking about earlier. It could also be subject choice that links back to that. It could be podcasts. It could be reading, any number of things. And we kind of group these under sort of super-curricular activities. What are you doing outside of the classroom that would make a top university think, this student stands out from others? And that can also include doing things like competitions. That can include doing things like Model United Nations. That could include, traveling and living in other countries. If, let's say, you're doing a languages degree, whatever it is, do things that link back to your degree that says, hey, choose me.
That's not easy at all. For I would say 17 years old kid. Yeah.
Well, it needs some help.
Well, exactly.
Sometimes, yeah.
How, in your role as a director of studies at Ashbourne, how would the school, the college, support students throughout that very difficult project, I would say, of applying to the university in the UK?
That's a good, we've got to remember, it is a personal statement, so we have to be careful here. Ultimately, it is the student's responsibility to manage that application process. That's true, okay? But at the same point, as a school, as an educator, this is a child. Right? They often, if you give them a blank piece of paper, obviously this is going to be a typed thing now, they won't know where to start. And you've got to hold their hand a little bit. Some students can get on with it by themselves, but in a lot of cases, they need a little bit of support. And Ashbourne has personal tutoring sessions in the first year of A-levels where they get support every single week. And that involves university application, which includes then leading into the second year, they get a subject-specific UCAS tutor. So through that, they get a lot of support. They also get specialised program support. They have an Oxbridge tutor, medicine, natural sciences, finance. So all these different things allow students to get additional support than just, hey, get on with it. Some schools will literally just say, get on with it, right? Now, there is a logic in that. The logic is that ultimately the student's going to have to go to university by themselves. It's a personal statement. And therefore, if they're forced to do it by themselves, then they're going to gain lots more independence. And some students will thrive in that scenario, but a lot of students won't. And this is what you've got to look out for. And I think that some of the best students, you don't want to interfere at all with the personal statement, because ultimately they're self-driven. They can do it all by themselves, but a lot of kids aren't. They lack confidence. They don't know where to start, and they need support, and they cannot be left by themselves. So I think it's about judging the kids. Don't treat them all the same, but looking out for kids that are kind of lost a little bit and going down the wrong path. And the other thing I would say is you'll get schools now being very wary about the usage of, sorry to bring it up again, usage of AI, okay? But I think especially in stuff like a personal statement, it's an amazing tool, right? So I'm not talking about, hey, write me a personal statement. No, of course not. But you can do lots of things to say, look, I'm thinking about applying for an engineering degree at UCL. What particular things do you think it might be good for me to do over this summer to help me towards that? And then it will come up with some really interesting ideas. And then not only will it come up with ideas, you can say, well, you can dig deeper. Okay, so let's look at idea number 3. It was talking about podcast or online courses. Could you give me some recommendations of courses that I could do in that particular area? And why do you think it would be useful? And then what kind of sentences could I write about if I went that way? That's not to say that you'd use those sentences. It's not to say you'd do those courses, but it just prompts you to think, actually, that's an interesting way to look about it, and keep you digging deeper. That's point number 1 with AI. The second point is write your personal statement. Before you give it to your personal tutor, then give it to AI and say, what do you think of it? What do you think the weaknesses are? How would you look to improve it? And AI is not the kind of oracle here. I think you've got to be careful with AI. It's not a finished product. But ultimately, it's like advice from a very good friend. You would never take the advice verbatim. Like any friend, even the best friend in the world, they give you advice. You still have to sort of digest it and think, well, maybe. And that's a lot with AI. It's just, it knows a lot, and you can keep going back to it, and it's non-judgmental. And it's also positive. It can make you feel good. So I actually would use that tool in a way to say, look, here's a paragraph. Don't rewrite it. What do you think is good about it? What do you think is not so good about it? And as you read it, it will give you some ideas and think, actually, that's a good one. Then you go to speak to your personal tutor. I was thinking about this. What do you think about that? And then the personal tutor can say something else. You've got your point, you've got AI, you've got the personal tutor, and then you can use that all to take the information and then write your sentence.
And still be authentic.
And still be authentic in your own voice.
Because I noticed that these days, university, the admissions officer would have their own tool to detect any sort
Absolutely.
of AI work.
Yeah.
So that would be extremely dangerous if students overuse it and to come up with a personal statement. However, I noticed that the personal statement structure changed this year. And what do you think about it?
That's a good point. What do I think about it? That's a very good question. Lots of thoughts come in my head. The first thing is, I wouldn't get too kind of misdirected here, okay? I think it still comes back to the same 2 questions. So they're now split into 3 parts, but it's still 2 questions. The questions are, why do you think you are a suitable candidate for this course, right? Sorry, go back. Why do you want to study this course? So why do you want to study this degree program? Number 1. Second, what makes you a suitable candidate? And if you just focus on those 2 questions, you will come up with lots of different points, or not, which you then need to answer and then develop yourself. You get all that information, and then you can talk about where you should put them into the 3 different places, because there are very many different schools of thought about these 3 different sections, okay? And even now, between different universities, they're arguing, okay? And I wouldn't get too bogged down in it. I think what will probably happen is after the first year, universities will change. So the advice in year 1 would be different to the advice in year 2. I just focus on those 2 questions. And then you can think, where is it best for me to fit the different things. I mean, question number one fits with the first thing about, why do you want to study this degree program? Pretty much fits with point one. The second one, what have you done academically, whether it's qualifications or within your subjects? Again, that fits. The third thing kind of sort of invites you to talk about extracurricular. It sort of invites that, but actually it's really inviting you to look into super-curricular. What additional things have you done in your life that links back to your degree program? But ultimately, all three sections, I swear, focus on those 2 points. And what you might find out is you've got a limited number of characters. You should run out of space. If you don't, then you haven't done enough. If you run out of space, then give your remaining things that you couldn't put in your statement to your tutor and say, here's some things you could write about me in your reference. Okay? And that's not to force them to do it. It's just that, let's face it, as a teacher writing a reference, the teacher is busy. They're managing, in some schools, 150 students. They don't have time to write good references or the reference that they wanted to write. So any student just coming up and saying, oh, here's some facts about me that you might want to consider for my reference. That is a very helpful thing. I don't think in any way it's not forcing the teacher to do anything. It's about merely allowing them to have information which they can use at their disposal to help them. That would be my advice. I mean, this is personal statement link, but just another thing that's connected here from a university point of view is just, and this is a big thing for the university, UCL have just changed their entrance tests. So if you're someone that's applying to UCL, make sure you're on that. That's a big thing to think about this year too. Yeah.
So I appreciate that it must be a very challenging time for both schools, students and parents when preparing the UCAS application, especially for this new cycle.
Yeah.
You explained to me that even though essentially there are going to be 3 questions that they must write an essay about,
yeah.
But then I really like the advice you said that if you're running out of space, which you should, the student should, then give it to, dare to give it to your tutors, the one who's going to write reference for you. I think that would be something that not many students would dare to do. Would you say so?
Yeah, I think that, you have to be diplomatic about these things. I think ultimately when you're writing your personal statement, rather than give it to your personal tutor, you can just say, here's the things I put in my personal statement and here's the things that I didn't. And let the personal tutor figure out by themselves what to do. You can't force them to write. But that would be a quite logical thing to do. And I think ultimately the universities, how much they place on the personal statement now is a debate. Just at the end, I was explaining that the UCL's now introduced its own entrance test. If you want to get into medicine, how well you do in a UCAT will trump basically any other thing, okay? So a personal statement has its importance. How much importance is a debate? But I think it's one of those things where you don't want to be put in a position where you don't get an offer because you wrote a weak personal statement. And the other thing about a personal statement is, rather than looking at it from am I going to use this to help me get into university, why don't you use it to think, I'm going to do these tasks to help me think more deeply about what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? That's 3 years at university, maybe 2 years of a master's degree, okay? You're not paying for this, but someone else is, right? And that's a colossal investment as well. And as an 18-year-old, you're starting to think about money. Some of you are studying finance at university. So you want to give it your best shot. So don't do these tasks because you're going through the motions to put it in your 2 sentences in your personal statement. Don't waste your time. Make sure you use it to think, okay, I'm going to read this book because I genuinely want to find out, am I interested in studying this? If you're not, then don't do it. And obviously you're going to do the wrong degree.
I like that advice. Now, many students would then realize that they choose the wrong degree. But then you already said earlier that it's fine for you to realize later on that you enjoy something else more.
Absolutely.
But then how would the student should go about it? As in, if they certainly realize in the middle of their, let's say, second years at university, and they realize, oops, I do not like this. What should they do? Should they try and complete the degree and then aim for a master in a different sort of field, or should they just choose completely new bachelor degree? What should they do?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the circumstances. I don't want to bring up finance again, but you've got to think about finance. If you're going to restart the degree, that's obviously a colossal expenditure. You've got to think about visas too. But I think there's a value to completing a degree. I think there's a value in that. I think the Masters does. I think you're quite right. The Masters offers a great avenue, but a lot of kids do. They do the first year of the degree and be like, that's not what I thought it was going to be. They had an idea and they didn't research. They just, I'm going to do economics, but they had no idea that it was going to involve so much maths. So absolutely, I think that if you're starting a degree, especially year one, if you're starting a degree and you don't like it and finance is not an issue, then look to restart or transfer or whatever. Absolutely, don't go 3 years of your life. That would be a waste of time, in my opinion. If you're in halfway through year two and it's a 3-year program, then it's a debate, I think, because then you got to think, opportunity cost. If you go back, can you go back at the beginning of year two, or have you got to go back to the beginning of year one? Don't know. That would depend on the candidate and what they're going to change to. But ultimately, I think the idea of stopping your degree and restarting should be something you should consider if it's not working out.
Not everyone would be able to get into their dream university.
Yeah.
What should they do if that's the case?
Just going back to the Masters thing as well, I think people might underestimate the value of getting a first degree at maybe not a top-ranking university and then upgrading for Masters. I think there is something in that. If students really are willing to put that level of commitment in, then I think that's something looking at. Right? So if let's say, because you've got to think about this, in A-levels alone, only 25% of grades will be A in any 1 year. So even if we had all the students in the world here and we gave them all a motivational speech, you can be the best student in the world, only 25% of A's are going to be grades are going to be A. That's 75% are not. So that's not going to change. Unless it's another COVID, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Right? I say 25% is slightly higher than that. So therefore, you have to recognize that you might go into A-levels as maybe a CD student, let's say, right? And you might work phenomenally hard for the 2 years and still end up with B's, right? And then you think, well, I've put all that effort in. Lee's giving me this great motivational speech every 5 weeks, and look, I still didn't get what I wanted, right? But I think you then have to think that there was a consequence to what you did before A-levels. You obviously didn't work to that same level. Don't be demoralized. You've made great ground. And therefore, you're not going to be able to go to the top universities, but you're going to go to a good one, but then get a first degree, then apply for Masters. I think that if you're looking to get a branded degree or Masters, that's the way I would look to do it.
I think that's a sensible approach.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Now, talk about let's going back a bit about choosing to study abroad or not.
Yeah. What
factor you would advise to Vietnamese parents when deciding whether should I send my kid to study abroad or not? Imagining at 16 years old.
Well, first, can you afford it? I mean, that's a big question straight away. Look, I'm a big believer in traveling. Yeah, I think that I'm very lucky. I've traveled to over 40 countries, and my perspective on life is completely different because I did that. I've spent a year living in Vietnam, again, completely changed my life. So I would absolutely encourage if students do get the opportunity to live abroad. I think it's a great thing to do. You've got to think about the relationship then with your parents. It's so when you studied abroad all those years ago, it's very different to now. And the connectivity just from like FaceTime or WhatsApp, whatever, and you can speak to your parents wherever you want, right? and they can fly over. It's just saying, it's a lot more connected now. So I think if fees are not an issue, and you've got the opportunity, I think it's a great thing to study overseas. I love Vietnam. I think it's a great country. I think that studying here for Vietnamese student, there's lots of significant advantages being close to home. You're going to be with your family's cooking. You've got the weather that you're used to. You've got your friends that you're used to, and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, London is just like a completely different place. England is a great place, but I also think London is very different to the rest of England. The amazing opportunities you've got for opera or museums, galleries, universities. I mean, there's just so many things going on in London that as a young person, not just you're studying, you actually get to learn about life. And I think that kind of exposure is just not the same if you're not in London. There's a film called Good Will Hunting. Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen that one?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But there's a great scene in it where Robin Williams is talking to Matt Damon, and Matt Damon is basically a genius, right? And Robin Williams, I can't remember exactly what he says, but I know the point. And his point he was saying is, look, you could probably recite the works of Shakespeare, okay? And if we went inside the cathedrals, like in Italy or anywhere in the world, you could probably tell me, what is on the ceiling, what brushes were used, and who made each painting and stuff. You could probably tell me all of that, but you couldn't tell me what it smelt like when you went into the room, okay? And you don't know what it felt like in terms of the temperature because you've never been there. And I think that there is something in that. I think that, before coming to Vietnam, I'd watched a lot about Vietnam on TV, but going to Vietnam is something completely different. And therefore, if you've got the chance to actually spend a couple of years in the UK prior to university for A-levels, you get the chance to really feel, what is England actually like before you go to university. And I think it's a great opportunity.
So throughout your 20 years working in education, what would be one of the most inspiring student success story that you can share with me?
Wow, that's a good question. Inspiring for the student or inspiring for me?
I would say inspiring for you. Something that you feel like you want to share to other students so they can learn from it. So it feels personally inspiring to you, but then something also you can share with other people. You want to share with other people.
Okay. There's so many different things that come to hit my mind. I'll just talk a little bit and then maybe we'll get to one, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes where a student's confidence goes up. Oh, there you go. One's just come in my head. Okay, this actually probably is a great one. So this student, so when he was growing up, his family had some issues where he became the sole carer of his younger brother. And he dropped out of school when he was about 15. His mum was in a terrible state. She was very much involved in narcotics, was not in a good place at all. Father was out of his life. And at 16, 17, he became the sole carer of his younger brother. Dropped out of education. Somehow his parents on his father's side got involved. They're absolutely lovely. And somehow helped to rebuild his life a little bit. And he got to about 19. And in sort of December time, in his sort of 20th year, for some reason, he and his grandparents got in contact with the school. And he came to meet me, and at this time, this guy had literally zero confidence. Like, literally zero confidence. And lovely guy. He had no his GCSEs were, I don't know, the equivalent of like D's and E's or whatever. There was nothing there. But he was capable. He was definitely capable. Anyway, so we liked him, and then he did pretty well in our entrance examinations. So he did well enough to pass, and then we started him to his course in January. So in January he started, and he completed his A-level course in 1.5 years. And yes, the A-levels, he did well. I think he did very well. He ended up getting like 2 A's and a B, which was incredible. But that wasn't the story. What the story was in a year's time, so the following December with our school show. And our school show, at that time, our computer science teacher, who became his kind of like his adopted mother, she ran our Bollywood club. And somehow she hoodwinked him into coming into it, right? And his parents then, his father, who he then connected back with, and his grandparents turned up at the school show, and they didn't know that he was dancing in this show. And he did. No, he wasn't like the greatest dancer in the world, but for him to get on stage was a miracle. And for him to dance as well as he did was also amazing. And I remember when his grandparents came out afterwards, you could see that they were just like, what has happened to our son? Because even though his grandson, what's happened to our son? And yes, of course, he now is doing incredibly well in the computing industry. He's connected with his dad, as I said, and he actually worked part-time for the school at some point. He's a great, great guy and doing really, really well. But the confidence change in him made me think, most people just don't recognize what they're capable of, and he did an amazing job. So yeah, there you go.
Final question. It's going to be a tricky one.
Oh, wow.
What education really means for you? And then what you would define success in a student journey?
Okay. But the second one's easier than the first one. I think if you're not enjoying education, that's the problem. You've got to be enjoying it. And I think that sometimes there's a phrase in where they say if you take a horse to water but you can't make it drink it. But I always say but you can shove its head in the water and it get a few drops, right? So that's my friend. That's rather violent. It's a bit harsh. Yeah. But I think that the idea of kind of pushing students to do their homework against their will and just getting it done, yes, of course it has some value. They did the homework, right? So interestingly, from my point of view, I work with our politics teacher, Dennis, and he sets a lot of homework. And then at a certain point in the year, I get involved to collect some of the homework for him, right? So yes, my aim is to get everyone to complete the work. That's true. But when they come in to meet with me, if I feel that they're doing it for doing its sake, I don't want the work. And it's trying to get them to do it because they believe that it's a good thing to do. So I think that links to enjoyment. Any student that's had a good teacher makes them want to learn. For all the students that you've consulted or dealt with, you'll hear a story, this this teacher really made me want to study English or maths or whatever it might be. A teacher can make a really big difference. Why? Because the student either gains more confidence or they actually enjoy coming into school, right? So I think that, and as a parent, if you heard that your teachers made your children enjoy their lessons, I mean, of course you care about the final result, but that's such a big deal, right? So, and then they came home and they were actually interested in learning. So I think that enjoyment is critical. So I think without enjoyment, I've got some doubts about education. People will disagree because ultimately you can actually just get A's and A stars through routine. You can become fit without enjoying it, and you can study and learn without enjoying it through routine. Yes, I understand that. But I think that enjoyment is important to bring that in somehow. A-levels narrow the focus. You don't have to do 10 subjects, you do 3. You get to choose subjects that you enjoy. Your degree choice. Don't choose a degree that you're not going to love for the next 3 years. Don't just do it for the sake of it. I really don't think that works. So I think enjoyment's one thing. And in terms of what education means to me, I think that I'm interested in creativity and I'm interested in helping people. And although a lot of my role, you might think, how does that work creatively? it's problem solving. So every student's different. We're lucky at Ashbourne because the classes are less than 10. There's less than 250 students. Therefore, you get lots of chances to really get to know the kids on an individual basis. And because of that, you can really help shape their lives rather than have a one-size-fits-all. So I think the idea of helping people, whether it's students, staff, parents, and be in a position to help them with their confidence, and being able to do so in a kind of sort of like in a creative way, finding creative solutions, I think that makes it very enjoyable and fun.
So that would probably define a success in student journey for you as well. They must enjoy it.
I think so. I think it's tricky because again, you know, I'm not like I'm thinking about some kids that would listen to this commonly. I didn't enjoy doing my A-level, and I get that. I'm saying that's the aim. I'm not saying that you're not going to get every student, but when you sit down at the beginning. So I interviewed a student the other day, and they're from Nigeria. They want to study psychology at university, and they wanted to do fine art, psychology, English literature, and business or economics. So I asked them about their subjects. With literature, they're going to get A star in GCSE, but they don't like to read. They're not reading anything this summer. I was like, no. Psychology, there was no substance to it. They'd watch something online. I don't know. Nothing there. Business economics, I don't think there's anything there except the fact that I think they were trying to appease their family because to keep some kind of link to earning money. I think that was it. And then art. So when she started talking about art, she had a genuine interest. She had done research. She was able to explain the different techniques that she'd learned and how that helped shape her as an artist. She was able to talk about different artists and their different styles. And I was interested. And then she said to me, but Lee, I know that this is not a career path, or this is not a subject that's going to help me with a career pathway. Okay, fine, and that was her conclusion. But then I think that's where the creativity comes in, because if that's where her interest is, and there's jobs out there that connect to art, and as we move forward, thinking creatively of problem solving is going to become more and more valuable. How can we get her to be able to find a degree that, in her mind, still allows her to be able to be successful in industry, but and also allows her to do subjects she actually enjoys? And I think that's it. You know, she could quite easily end up dropping art, doing economics, business, and maths, or something like that, and really not enjoying her A-levels at all. And that would be a great shame.
Lots to think about, especially when we deal with all the young adults with different hobbies and different passions, but also they can be quite strategic and practical about what I like might not be what would suit me best in the future, because of course everybody has to think about their own career and then making money and having families and stuff like that. Thank you so much for the conversation we have today together. As usual, always a pleasure to have you with me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to do a quick 5-question, like a fire question thingy. I'm just going to ask you and you answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay? First question, if you can choose, Oxford or Cambridge?
Oxford.
Most surprising fact about Vietnamese students?
Sorry, you asked. The thing is, the first thing that comes in my head for English people is that the majority of the surnames are the same. So that would be
all Nguyen?
Yeah, that would be the first thing. The second thing that comes to mind is the noisy thing. I think people don't realise how loud a Vietnamese playground is, and that is not. I'm not being like negative at all. I actually really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's very energetic, right? So if you're not an educator, who would you be? What job would you have?
So many things.
Pick one. Pick the first thing that comes to your mind.
I'd like to make music. Yeah.
Musicians.
Or just I don't know if that means playing or making, but I'd like to be involved in the creation of music. Yeah.
The best book you've read this year?
I keep forgetting the name of it. It's David Goggins. I think it's Never Finished.
Never finished.
It's a great book because it links to education in the sense that we put limits on what we're capable of and we don't know. He really is inspirational because he just smashes through the idea that, that's as much as I could have done. No, you're talking nonsense. You could have done more.
And last question, one word to describe Ashbourne College.
My dad. Family, there you go.
Family. Thank you very much.
Thank you.